How to increase your MMR in Overwatch? The answer should be as simple as it gets. Get better at the game and yeah, I don't even have anything clever for that. It really is that simple. The best practice would be stopping to pay attention to your SR as a number and focus more on improving your gameplay. However, we are still playing a video game. SR gains are something quite satisfying for a lot of people. I mean, who doesn't like seeing their numbers rise in the game? So today we'll talk about your MMR, how to increase your MMR in particular, how to improve at the game in general, and we'll also cover stat padding. Now without further ado, let's get right into it. There are things that you can do specifically to work towards an MMR improvement as opposed to just saying get better at the game. After all, that is a very broad statement and there is a lot to get better at in Overwatch as a whole. But some of you might wonder, what is my MMR at though? Can I check anywhere? Or maybe what does MMR even mean? MMR stands for Hidden Matchmaking Rating. I know there's no H in front of it, but the word hidden is quite important because I don't recall any game where your MMR is displayed anywhere. Don't confuse your MMR with your skill rating though, or SR for short. Your SR is the number that is displayed when you check your rating on your career profile. So let's get a quick explanation in here. What is your MMR? What does it do? And how do you know where it's at? Your MMR is a value that the game uses to do a number of things, primarily finding teammates and opponents with a similar number, and calculating how much elo you should be rewarded at the end of a match. While finding players with a similar MMR is not the most difficult thing, after all it's just about comparing two values, finding out how much SR you deserve is far more complicated. So complicated in fact, that I dedicated an entire video to it. Link will be in the description below if you are interested. If you want to find out where your MMR is at, even though it is not displayed anywhere, there is a little trick you can use. So write down how much elo you gain for each win and lose. Your MMR is not something that fluctuates wildly. The game is not gonna rate you at platinum level one day and then suddenly decide that you're a silver the next day. Your MMR is all about the consistent gameplay performance that you can deliver. So let's assume that you are one of those poor souls that fluctuates between two divisions. For the sake of argument, let's say you drop in and out of diamond. That will be a 3000 skill rating. Pay attention to how much elo you get once you're below 2900. If from there on out you get more SR for any win than you lose for any loss, that means your SR is likely somewhere in diamond. If you then hit 3100 and suddenly start losing more SR than you gain, then odds are that your MMR is in fact exactly on 3000. While that was a very streamlined example, bottom line is that your MMR is right at the breaking point between gaining more than you lose and losing more than you gain. That mechanism exists to make sure you don't drop so low that you shitstone people who are way worse than you, but also to ensure that you don't climb too high into a division where you can't perform reliably. Now let's get to the fun part. How do you increase your MMR to finally escape your dreaded elo? In order to increase your MMR, you need to be able to either objectively analyze your matches from memory or get some sort of recording software that allows you to review your games. Because there are two things we're trying to fight here. It is your perception of improvement versus your numerical improvement. You might think, hey, I'm really getting better at Soldier, but if your stats don't reflect that, then your MMR is obviously not going to move. After all, the game works with numbers and nothing but numbers. And as counterintuitive as that sounds at first, sometimes you're gonna have to do something that doesn't seem to make sense to you. Let's say you're a support main, you have a friend who's a DPS main, you're duo queuing and you know exactly that your friend can kill things if he stays alive long enough. Even if it is your experience that the other guys in your team are not worth healing because they are not doing their jobs, just sticking to your friend is going to stagnate your MMR. And that applies even when just pocketing your friend wins you more games on average. Trust me, I went through exactly that thing. Because at the end of the day, you still did significantly less healing than you should have. As a healer, you're supposed to support the entirety of your team and not just your friend. And now you might think, so the game forces me to stop doing something that wins me games? How does that make sense? But listen, you will reach a point where you and your friend doing your thing is not going to be enough to win games anymore. You will reach a point where the heavily team reliant nature of this game becomes apparent. And I'm not just talking about sessions where you decide to solo queue. Ultimately, Overwatch is a team-based game, and the higher you climb in ratings, the more important it becomes for all 6 members of a team to work together. If your team plays at 4+2 versus a team where all 6 players work together, you will lose. If you keep winning games on a stagnating MMR, you will inevitably gain less elo per win over time and lose far more for every single loss. So it is in your best interest to learn how to play your character of choice in a manner that helps your entire team. Now, that was very specific, but let's get back to the reviewing your own matches part. If you have an Nvidia graphics card, you can go to their homepage and download Shadowplay. Shadowplay is a recording program that usually usually does not impact performance in any significant way and also does not take up too much hard drive space. I believe AMD has a similar offering called GVR, but I'm not entirely sure. Alternatively, you could also use OBS, which is free and just record in a lower resolution. You don't need a high definition recording to see whether you misplayed or not. 720p is usually more than enough. When reviewing your gameplay, pay attention to your positioning relative to the rest of your team. Try to figure out why you should have positioned yourself differently. Good positioning is often half the victory in Overwatch, so do make sure you're not always caught out in the open or get picked off because you were too aggressive. Learn when to best disengage, when it's still worth re-engaging, and how to best position yourself to get as many shots off as possible without being heavily contested. Pretty much any hero can seem broken when uncontested. Getting free shots off as Zen, getting free backline picks as Lucio, or diving the supports as Winston when the enemy tank's already pushed forward. And suddenly you have a hero that went from, oh yeah, they exist, to holy fuck, they're OP. This in particular will help you generally becoming a better player, and by that it inevitably also increases your MMR. But let's talk about stat padding now. We've talked about how gold medals don't matter numerous times, and they don't. What you really should be comparing are your stats in your current game versus your stats in previous games, trying to min-max essentially. If you're playing McCree, then nobody's going to expect you to get gold damage against a Junkrat on your team. Heroes are built with different strong points, but if you look at your stats and you see that in this match in particular you got very little damage off, then when reviewing your footage you should pay attention to why that is. Were there shots that you could have taken but you didn't? Did you miss a lot of shots in that game? If so, should you have swapped off to a better suiting pick? There is min-maxing that you can do with a bunch of heroes, making sure your healing orb is always on someone to keep your total healing high, taking shots on Reinhardt shields before an engagement, you know, things like that. And while that might initially sound odd in a way that it only benefits your stats, your healing orb could save someone who suddenly has a dive comp in their face, and that shield breaking faster in a team fight because you attacked it beforehand could allow you to get free shots on the rest of their team. What you should avoid doing is emptying your clip right before an engagement. Having to reload at the wrong time could at worst cost you a team fight. What you should also avoid doing is soaking damage into the wrong targets. At the end of the day, whether your MMR goes up or down is still contingent on losing or winning. So if you spend your entire match boosting Farah rockets up Roadhog's ass without ever confirming a kill on him, then that gold damage is not gonna help you. Try to go for as many confirmed kills as possible rather than a high damage output. Getting a lot of damage off without confirming kills is terrible, because that means all you've been doing is feeding the enemy support ultimates. Now here's a bit of a curveball. Remember when I said that your MMR does not usually fluctuate wildly in a short amount of time? Well, for a bunch of players it does, and that's because they make their performance entirely reliant on the rest of their team. This often happens to flex players. A player who just fills a comp with whatever their team asks them to will get a lot of playtime spread across a variety of heroes. They will never learn how to truly master any of them, and whether they do well or not is dependent on whether their team is good or not. Your MMR can be calculated much easier if you have a few dedicated main heroes that you play most of the time, because the game has more data of your performance, and since you spend a lot of time on your mains, you also learn to perform reliably on them no matter whether your team is bad or not. Mathematically, calculating your MMR is just plain and simply said easier. The less heroes you play, the more often you play them, and the more consistent your performance is on them. Optimally speaking, you should have a main hero in each category. However, I'd recommend you practicing heroes that you already feel you're performing better with than others. While it is possible to force a main on you, so to speak, that is usually tied to a pretty significant time investment. So you're better off just playing whatever you feel strong on naturally. So let's try to summarize what we have been talking about today. Your MMR is a hidden number that represents which players you are supposed to be paired up with. It is also a key factor in deciding how much SR you get per win. Once you hit the top of your MMR or even surpass it, you will be getting unfavorable SR gains. So our goal is to keep extending our MMR in order to keep our SR gains balanced or hopefully even favorable. Needless to say that an increase in MMR is tied to your performance in the game, meaning if your MMR increases, that is also often a sign confirming that you are getting better at the game, at least statistically. In order to give your MMR an easy time establishing your actual skill, you are advised to choose a few main heroes you play on most of the time rather than just filling. Since improving at the game is still the best way of increasing your MMR consistently, I suggest trying to record and review your matches. Pay close attention to your positioning and try to figure out what you could have done better on an individual basis. I hope this video helped you guys out a bit in understanding how the MMR functions and how to best increase it. At the end of the day, the answer is still as simple as getting better at the game, but I hope that my proposed suggestions will help you achieving right that. Thank you everybody so much for watching. Don't forget to drop me a like on your way if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want to see more, and hope to see you all next time. There were so many play the game worthy things. Not even kidding. Not even kidding.
I love how we have. Damn it!
It's so fucking
Fucking. If you died, then
I'm not promoting that on my channel.
you have highlights. You have a highlight, man. Don't worry.
Now we have to wait for another 5 minutes.
I just got a second legendary.
It's a lit.
You made us wait another 5 minutes just so we don't get a meme.
Listen, okay. I'm not gonna skip if it's my play of the game. Is that a deal? Okay.